Hi, I'm Pam Ramsay, and I'm going to tell you a story about my childhood family restaurant. This one's about Rosie, the blacksmith's daughter. Rosie came with attachments in addition to afflictions. Her biggest affliction was her mouth. She could fling the trash faster than a seasoned truck driver. She had her own station of booze, and nightly, if you listened well, you'd hear the laughter and raunchy jokes permeating from that corner of the restaurant. Those half-in-the-bag customers who had recently made their way from Rudy's, the saloon across the street, tried to get the best of Rosie. They'd fling the hash, and just as fast she'd throw it right back at them. Those customers who wanted a calmer dinner knew not to sit in Rosie's section. Rosie was my mom and dad's first employee. My family had recently moved to Aurora on the Iron Range from southern Minnesota, where Dad had managed a creamery. The contrast was as apparent as the North versus the South. Those living in southern Minnesota, closer to the Twin Cities, were much more, can I say, socially refined than those in the mining country. Anyone not born and raised in Arrowhead country was in for a cultural shock. Recently, the town had come under siege with an influx of construction workers there to build the Erie mining taconite plant, and one of the first prefab communities in America. Aurora was like a Wild West town, right down to its Long Branch saloon with Matt and Kitty as proprietors. Overnight, a huge silver bullet Airstream trailer city, as vast as the eyes could see, had sprung up temporarily, housing the construction workers, mostly men, that had left their families behind. Anyone not from the Iron Range was called a pack sacker, and it was apparent that they were not welcome. Later, their families began to arrive, but few of the old-timers would sell their land to build a packsacker a house. Thus, the new planned town of Hoyt Lakes became a reality. It was the entertainment of the day to drive the 5 miles out from Aurora to see how many new houses were built each day. "Those places won't last 5 years," they said. Today, almost 70 years later, those original houses are still being lived in. In the small town of Aurora, there were more saloons than eating establishments, and that's where my mom and dad came in. My brother and I were both in elementary school, and Mom, she wanted something to do just to keep her busy. A for rent sign came up on a small coffee sandwich shop downtown in Aurora. Chappie, the proprietor, owned the only cafe as well as the restaurant for lease across the street. It so happened, without Mom's knowledge, of course, he was ready to permanently close up his shop, which would leave the town without a restaurant. He agreed to rent the place to Mama, but only if she'd take on one of his waitresses, Rosie, on as a permanent employee. Rosie was a full-blown epileptic with grand malls. You know, there is something appealing about little towns, like we see in LaGrange so often. They take care of their own. Rosie was used to being teased. She'd had fits all of her life. When one was coming on, Rosie would get that look on her face and she'd stiffen up. The help learned to spot the look and the body language. "Rosie's gonna have a fit," they'd yell. The first thing Dad would do, for example, if she was pouring hot coffee, was to pry that glass container server away from her grip. Once done, Rosie would crumble to the floor, just like an accordion, and then start shaking like a chicken with its head cut off, thrashing up and down. Next, there would be a calm as Rosie would relieve herself on the restaurant floor. Dad would try to prevent her from biting her tongue off by placing a wooden spoon in her mouth. And then when it was all over, Dad would pick her up, help her to a seat, and soon after cleaning herself up, Rosie would be back to work again. She was one of the most loyal and the best employees Dad ever had. Later, Rosie married, and she had 5 kids. She became a homemaker. Rosie's affliction made it impossible to get a driver's license. I would come home from college and see Rosie like a mother goose walking down the street with her 5 goslings, trailing single file behind. She looked like the Pied Piper of the storybooks. Rosie married an alcoholic, and all 5 children had wide-set eyes, broadcasting their father's addiction. Rosie would often bring the children to see my mother, who was as proud of them as if they were our own. She'd set the whole family down on one of the round counters, and each would have a small pop and a homemade cookie, while Mom and Rosie would shoot the breeze. All of the children did well in school, and Mom would often call me to tell me about their many achievements. Several of the kids later worked for Mom in her catering business.